Yo, this D-Lo 404. Excuse me. I just wanted to drop a quick video this morning on my morning commute to work. You know, first off, I want to thank all my subs. If you're not subscribed, please, I ask that you please subscribe to the channel. I did notice I picked up at least 2 new subs last night. I want to say thank you to those 2 new subscribers. I hope you enjoy the content on the channel. I want to see my subs engaged. I really appreciate it if you guys leave comments. Without comments, you know, I can't really gauge how you guys are, you know, receiving the content that I'm delivering. You know, also, I please ask that you like and share my videos. With that said, let me get into this. Now, what I want to talk about today is, you know, this strategy of let's let the fight build. And I'll start this off by talking about it's actually a response to a comment someone said on another video that I was actually commenting on, and they were responding to me, and I was talking about, you know, how Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn really just didn't want to make that fight, you know, and the offers that they made Deontay Wilder were pretty much spelled that out, you know. So the guy told me, he said, man, you're stupid, you know. The only reason they didn't want to make that fight, they're trying to let that fight build some more. They want to make that fight build so that they can maximize their profit. And you know, I actually respond to it. I'm to the point. I'm not going to respond to people who call me stupid and all that. Like, whatever. Well, if you think I'm stupid, we shouldn't be talking. But so I didn't respond to the guy on the video, but I'm responding now simply because I know I've seen people make that excuse a lot, and I know that may be a popular excuse for some people, but to me, it's a dumb strategy. I mean, first of all, when it comes to that fight, if you're getting offered more than any other heavyweight that's ever been offered in the history of the division up front, then that in of itself says the fight is built as much as it needs to build. I mean, if you're on your end, if you want to build a fight because you want to see the most profit or you want to see the biggest payday you can see, well, straight away your guarantee would have been your biggest payday. Now, mind you, that is before any back end money, any back end from pay-per-view, which was going to be 50-50. So to me, that pretty much debunks that notion on that particular fight. But also the other reason I'm kind of delving into this is because, you know, we all want to see the 2 top guys, or the 2 perceived top guys at welterweight, go head to head, and that's Terrence Crawford and that's Errol Spence. And I myself have even said that, you know, maybe these guys want to let the fight build a little bit. And of course, I don't think that fight is at the fever pitch that AJ versus Wilder is. But at the same time, that's why you have promoters. It's the promoter's job, once the fight is made, to get out there and promote the fight. I mean, that's in their title, their job title. If the fight's made and they get out there and promote the fight like they're supposed to, and actually spend the money on the front end, it'll be multiplied on the back end. And I think that's where things are falling off with a lot of these fights. You know, it's like the promoter wants everybody else to promote the fight. They want the fans to promote the fight, and all they got to do is announce the fight. I mean, but the bottom line is, you know, you got to get out there and run some commercials. You got to get out there and do some press tours. You got to promote the fight. And sometimes you may need to promote the fight even before it's made. You know, I mean, we've seen this all throughout boxing history where, you know, guys were talking about fighting, and at the other fights that had nothing to do with either guy, might just be somebody in the division, HBO, Showtime, ESPN, or whoever were talking about that potential showdown. They were talking about that potential showdown because it was being pushed, you know, by the fans, by other media, and by the promoter, saying that, hey, we might make this fight. But as long as you know that they're sitting around thinking that fights just build because guys say they want to fight and then they just keep fighting other people, you know, I just don't think that strategy works. I mean, what happened with Floyd and Manny Pacquiao, with that fight being as huge as it was, that was a one-off as far as saying that giving us a fight 4 or 5 years after we really wanted it, after the Best Buy date, it's really going to crackle and really do big numbers. I just don't know that strategy works, and it's very risky anyway. Because even when you think about it, how do we know that if that fight had been made prior to Manny Pacquiao getting knocked out by Marquez, the fight would have done more pay-per-view buys than it did when it was actually made? You know, how do we know that if that fight had been made, you know, fresh off of Manny beating Cotto? You know, how do we know that if it had been made at that point, it wouldn't have been bigger than what it was when it was finally made? Because a lot of people, even going into the fight, you know, were voicing their concern about the fight being made too late, even before they actually saw the fight. And you know, and in my opinion, you know what I'm saying, it's just one of them things where the fans, you know, got taken for a ride. And my thing isn't, you know, about the fight you made. It's all the pay-per-views that we as fight fans paid for while we were waiting for them to make that fight. Every pay-per-view that we watched with Pacquiao or Floyd, we were waiting for them to say after the fight that Floyd's next or Manny's next. Especially in Pacquiao's case. Pacquiao's with Bob Arum just like Terrence Crawford is. And it was always with Manny Pacquiao. I used to be to Bob Arum. I got talked to Bob Arum. You know, and it was like, okay, man, you got to mouth yourself. That mic's in your face. You're the fighter. You tell the fans that you want Floyd, and you tell your promoter you want Floyd, and let's see what happens. And that was something that I never really heard up until the very end, before the fight actually happened, that Manny was actually coming out saying that he wanted that fight. Yeah, I mean, I remember doing that dumb commercial and stuff. But as far as like after fights, he never really just said, you know, I want Floyd, turned around to Bob and said, get me the Floyd Mayweather fight. You know, it was always I'm going to concede to my promoter. And I think, you know what I'm saying, it's possible that in Crawford's situation, he's saying all the right things as far as saying that he wants to fight. And I think he even turned to Arum and said, I want that fight after he beat Jeff Horn. But at the same, it's one thing to say it after a fight, there's another thing to say it when y'all are in meetings, or when you call the man on the phone, or when he calls you about fighting David Benavidez. You know what I'm saying? You should have that angst and urgency in your voice and say, hey, this ain't the fight I asked you for. You know, because at the end of the day, you are the promoter. You are the fighter. Nobody's tuning in to watch Bob Arum. We don't care if Bob Arum shows up at the fights. But if Arum is only interested in giving us the fights that he wants to see, or doing that home, you know, that old thing he used to do with Pacquiao, all the in-house fights, if that's all he's interested in doing, it's going to turn the consumer off. And Bud, as much as we love you, as much as we adore you as a fighter, and your courage and your heart, your tenacity, and the way you go about business in the ring, hey, we'll turn against you. We'll stop tuning in to you just as well as we can anyone else, just because you're failing to deliver on what our expectations are of you. And our expectations are only what they are because of what we've seen in you in the past. We've seen that willingness to go in there and fight whoever, and go in there and get the job done once the bell rang. And that's what we need you to do in this Errol Spence situation, is to to drive home that urgency to your promoter, because Errol doesn't have a promoter. Drive home that urgency to your promoter and say, I want this fight, and I don't want to fight anybody else next. Get me this fight. This is what the fans want. This is what I want. This is what Errol Spence wants. Let's make it happen. You know, when I talk about fights, and that, you know, when I hear people talking about letting the fights build, I think about the fights that didn't happen that I wanted to see. You know, I think about that one that really comes to mind because I was a huge fan of him, even though when he first started boxing, I was hoping he'd get beat every time he fought, because I didn't like his arrogance and cockiness at first. But Gamboa, that eventually, after probably about his 10th fight or so, he won me over. I couldn't, as much as I didn't like, you know, the way he strutted around the ring with his hands down, and you know, and his cockiness, I just got to a point where I just couldn't deny how good the kid was, and I really appreciated his skills and the kind of combinations he threw that no one else at the time was really throwing. You know, it was kind of reminiscent of watching some of Roy's fights, you know, in a way. You know, not saying he's Roy Jones Jr., but I'm just saying some of those combinations he would throw, you know, like 3, 4, 5 hooks in a row and stuff like that. I mean, that won't be over. But Gamboa versus Wanma was a very highly anticipated fight. I mean, they actually fought on the same cards. They fought common opponents. You know what I'm saying? They you know, so many things had already been done to build that fight. The fans were clamoring for that fight, and Bob Arum trying to maximize his money on both guys as being so, you know, A-sides in other fights. He kept on trying to get one more fight in before the fight, and basically Salido derailed that whole thing. You know, he got Salido and Wanma together, and you know, in a fight that Wanma was expected to look good, and it was a bit of measuring stick of how Gamboa had done against Salido, and it didn't work out. You know, it didn't work out. Wanma got knocked out, and honestly was never the same fighter. You know, so that was a situation where that letting it marinate or building a fight just totally went wrong. You know, I'll even speak on 2 other guys that were 2 of my favorites. Andre Ward, Andre Durrell. Those guys were supposed to fight in a Super 6 tournament. I know Durrell was coming off of an injury. I want to say that was after the Abraham fight. But honestly, if you think back, if any of you guys remember back at that time, there also was an interview where I can't remember which one said it, whether it was Durrell or Ward or maybe they were together during the interview. But it was said that this is a fight that we want to make for our families later on down the road. This is going to be a big time fight that we do toward the end of our careers. Because the guys were really good friends, and you know, Ward had actually went up in weight for the Olympics and fought at a higher weight to give Durrell a chance to medal in the Olympics at I think it was at middleweight, and Durrell ended up winning the bronze. So you know, that goes to show, you know, how close these guys were, and I totally understand the friendship thing. But at the same time, you're prize fighters, and you're actually in a tournament where if you both expect to win, you know at some point you got to fight each other. And the way I look at it is, had they been in the championship against each other, they'd have had to fight. But it was a fight that you know, even though the guys were good buddies, I actually wanted to see that fight at some point, because I felt like the competitiveness of the 2 fighters wouldn't allow it to be a buddy brawl, that they would actually go out there and fight each other and try to win. And you know, and basically, you know, Ward stayed Andre Ward and became, you know, pretty much a Hall of Fame fighter, and retired undefeated, and having accomplished all sorts of goals in the sport, winning multi-titles in two divisions. You know, became the pound for pound #1. while Darrell pretty much just underachieved his whole career. So, you know, that's another fight that should have been made, could have been made, but just never happened. You know, even with the Floyd Mayweather-Zab Judah fight, it ended up happening after Zab Judah lost. I think he lost to Carlos Baldomir. But had that not happened, that fight would probably have been a lot bigger than what it was. Because, you know what I'm saying, the talks for that fight was going on probably a year prior to that. But, you know, it kind of one of them things where guys want to get in, you know, other fights and you know, maximize their earnings before they make the fight. And it pretty much ended up happening was, you know, Judah lost, and the fight wasn't as big as it would have been, in my opinion. And they're just all you know, boxing history sprinkled with so many of those fights. You know, there are fights that were made and canceled because guys pulled out of fights with injury or, you know, whatever, contractual issues, weren't happy with the purse they were getting, stuff like that happens. But, you know, let me look at, I'll touch on one more. You know, the Triple G Canelo fight, I feel like we waited. I felt like the fight to a lot of boxing fans wasn't what it was expected to be, primarily because we had to wait longer than we wanted to wait for that fight. You know, I felt like, you know, and maybe Canelo was to blame. He wasn't ready to move up the middleweight or whatever. But, you know, that fight could have been made 2-3 fights earlier. You know, and the last one I'll mention is Adonis Stevenson and Sergey Kovalev. I mean, that fight probably will never happen now. And even if it does happen, it won't have half the luster or the appeal that it would have had it happen when it should have happened. You know, so I mean that's just my take on the whole thing with you know, guys want to, you know, whether it's the fighter, whether it's promoter or whoever, you know, I mean I honestly feel like you guys are jerking the boxing fans when you you know, continuously talk about making these fights, but then go out of your way to not make the fight. And you know, that's something that has to stop. You know, like I said, boxing needs to wake up and realize, you know, that the fan is the consumer, and if your consumer's not happy, I don't care if you're selling ham, I don't care if you're selling dogs, I don't care if you're selling hamburgers, whatever you're selling. If your consumer is not happy with the product that they're getting, at some point, even if you're giving them another product, even if you know, if you went to Burger King and said you want a Whopper, and they was like, well, we're really out of Whoppers, but we'll give you this double cheeseburger. You know, for a minute you might take it. You know, you might say, okay, I get it today. But if every dang time you go there trying to get a Whopper, you can't get one, at some point you're gonna say, well, I'll take my business up. Well, I can't get what I want from you guys. And that's, you know what I'm saying, and that's the way I feel like about boxing. You know, I feel like too many times as fight fans, we're not getting what we're asking for, and we're having to settle for something else. And at some point, you just turn away from certain fighters or certain promotional outfits because they have a history of conducting themselves this way. Or in some cases, guys turn completely away from the sport. And I'm gonna double back on the one fight that is, you know, one of the biggest fights, if not the biggest fight in boxing, that didn't happen for one reason or another, and that's that AJ versus Wilder fight. If they keep messing around and not making that fight, and I'm not gonna sit here and try to play both sides against the middle and say that I think it's both guys. No, I think one team really wants to fight, and they've shown that. And I think one team doesn't want to fight, but they don't want to come out and say they don't want to fight. But if they keep messing around, something's going to happen.